So I will start us off. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to this Workforce Wednesday webinar. We are continuing our series on trauma with the Illinois Collaboration on Youth. We are joined again this week with Jocelyn Vega, back to your regularly scheduled presenter. She is back from her vacation, and we hope that she had a great birthday last week. And so she is going to be presenting with us today. But again, as always, before we get started with her, a couple housekeeping items that we want to start off with. My name is Kirsten Bayer with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support at Illinois State University, and I will be your moderator and technical support today. So if you have any questions or comments or concerns regarding today's materials, presentation, or any technology issues, please feel free to reach out to me directly via the chat or through email. I will put that email in the chat momentarily here. We will have the slide deck and the recording today available to you on our Illinois Workforce Academy website. I will put that website in the chat again momentarily, and I'll put it in the chat throughout the session, like at the end of the session as well. So if you need to snag it, you can. There will also be a follow-up email tomorrow that you will receive that will have the exact website in that follow-up email and a link to a follow-up survey. So if you could provide us with some feedback about the trauma series or this session specifically, or any future topics that you would like us to collaborate and put on for the Workforce Wednesday webinars, we always welcome that feedback for our planning team and our WIOA professional development team. We do have live closed captioning on for you today. So if you need that for accessibility reasons or for just note-taking purposes, feel free to turn that on. And then you are on Zoom webinar. So everybody is muted. You do not have the ability to unmute yourself, but we have been doing every week where if you want to simply raise your hand when Jocelyn prompts us for that live question and answer time, we are able to unmute you to allow for that conversation to happen. And as always, you can feel free to participate in the chat and the Q&A, and we will have time for question and answers as well towards the end of the presentation. I know Jocelyn has a lot of information to get through today. So we're going to start off with her. We'll do our beginning polls here really quickly. So which partner do you best represent? We'll give everyone a couple seconds to answer this one if you're joining us from Title 1, 2, 3, or 4, or if you best represent another WIOA partner or stakeholder, or our state or local workforce innovation board. We'll give everyone a couple more seconds to answer this one. Good morning, everybody who's saying good morning in the chat. We appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and end this poll. We have most of you joining us from Title I or other WIOA partners and stakeholders, so we appreciate you answering these polls just for our analytics. The last one that we're going to do this morning is where's your local area? Hopefully, wherever you are, it's not raining. I'm in Central Illinois and it is pouring this morning. Kind of a dreary week we got going on here. So hopefully, wherever you are, maybe the sun is peeking out a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to end that poll, share the results. Most of you are kind of sprinkled across the state. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us and spending your time with us this morning. We're excited to get started with this trauma training. I'm going to hand it off to Jocelyn.
Thank you so much for those wonderful polls and welcoming back, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing me to return. I had a wonderful birthday. I had a wonderful time off. And I am so excited to be with each and every one of you today. This is one of our last trainings that we're going to have. And I don't know what I'm going to do on Wednesday mornings, right? It's going to feel like a phantom of sorts of, not being able to connect with you. I recognize so many names in this point with the chat box. It's so wonderful to see your names return, see you here. Thank you so much for your time as we discuss such an important topic of, not only trauma-informed care, but what does that look like right now in our collective reality of COVID-19? I believe, this is from a personal and professional perspective. This is such a pivotal moment for us in our field and what we do and the opportunities we have, the challenges we face. So I'm really inviting you today whether you had coffee or not, or you need to go make some, really be yourself and give yourself this time and what you want to take away. What do you want to process? Because what I'm going to really focus on is our self-awareness, what we need, what we've experienced, because you are your greatest tool. You are your greatest asset. And as we continue to navigate this pandemic, we're going to need to rely on ourselves and rely on others to decide what our next steps look like. So that's where I'm coming from today. That's what I hope to share with you, my intention to honor your time as we dive in. It's also great to see, everyone's coming from so many different places across the state. And it's so beautiful to know that we are, for some of us, 100 miles apart, yet we're still here. So thank you so much for making today count. This is my team. If you were here last week, you met Gabriella and Hashima, who led in my absence. And I am the Director of Trauma Initiatives here at ICOI and for statewide trauma initiatives when it comes to the Illinois Department of Human Services. So big blessing. Thank you, everyone. And I now want to invite each and every one of you to slow down. Take that moment for yourself. And I really want you to pause. Maybe you have your good old notebook out, a post-it note, a pen randomly. But right now, I'm just going to play a bell. And I want you to reflect. What do you want to grow this spring? We're in a whole new season, everyone. We started this training series in the winter. Things are starting to look different and feel different on the outside. So what are we going to grow inside of ourselves for this season? So grab your pen, mentally think about it. And I want you to write down, what do you want to grow? And I'm going to play that sound now as you reflect. What do you want to grow? You're going to hear the noise 3 times, and then we'll return back, okay? So remember, what do you want to grow this spring? Beautiful, everyone. I hope you truly gave yourself that moment of what you want to grow, because each and every one of you have that potential and have done so in the past. As always, we want to drop into a moment for ourselves, right? We're always on the go, 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 doing this and that. And we have to-do lists for everything. And sometimes we don't have a to-do list for ourselves. So let's give ourselves literally just a minute to reflect, to pause, and to let go of some of our stress for the day. You're going to be guided through a breathing exercise now. Participate however you would like, but give yourself a mental moment to slow down.
Hi, and welcome to Headspace. So no matter what's going on in your life right now, no matter how many thoughts are racing around your mind, no matter how the body's feeling, just take a moment to sit down and take a big, deep breath, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. As you breathe in, a sense of taking in fresh air, the lungs expanding. As you breathe out, a sense of letting go of any stress in the body, in the mind, just feeling the muscles soften and relax. And close your eyes if you'd like to. One more, breathing deeply in through the nose and out through the mouth. And just take a moment to pause. Allow the thoughts to come and go. And then just gently opening the eyes again.
Thank you, everyone, so much for your time, for having these check-in moments. Let me know in the chat if that was helpful. If there's anything you want to grow this spring, right? Let's share. Let's be in this moment together. And I hope, again, that this was helpful for you. And thank you for allowing me to start off this training by stopping, right? We have to have those moments where we stop. So with some objectives, right? So we make sure we're all on the same page. What are some things that we're going to cover today? As Kirsten mentioned, there's a lot to cover. This is a slide deck. I will say I recommend printing out. You can print out multiple slides in one sheet, right? We want to save paper. But I think this is a really powerful day that each of us have in being here today. So we're gonna talk about trauma through a COVID lens, right? It's gonna be different from what we've talked about in the past, but I promise you it's all gonna come together. And this kind of like climbing a mountain, if you've ever been on a hike or on a trail, it's like reaching that end, you've done all this work, and now you're able to get this perspective, right? So that's what we're gonna do today, and reinforcing a lot of concepts. We really wanna focus on coping. This is, I guess, the biggest actionable item you're gonna walk away with. What does coping look like? How do I identify myself in stress, in trauma, as being alive in this moment of the pandemic, of our world, and so much more? We definitely have to talk about ourselves as a professional community. Thank you, Ishmael, for sharing that you love that exercise. I'm so grateful that this was useful for you. We got to start off for ourselves, everyone. We got to pour into our cups. We got to look out for ourselves. And there's so much power behind that and longevity as well. So thank you, Ishmael. I really appreciate your feedback. I love hearing from the audience. It just drives the whole presentation to a whole nother level when, you know, we engage in this way. And I can't wait to hear from y'all. We also want to really give you the permission to focus on yourself. So I really want today's presentation to be about, you know, your comfort, of course, about you, I, right, this me, versus, you know, others, or, you know, other people. It's you. So give yourself to truly fall into yourself and whatever your capacity is, because it's about us, people. When it really comes to trauma-informed care, it starts with me. It starts with my own connection to that trauma, or what I need to grow in that relationship to heal that trauma, to support that other person's trauma, right? So we gotta focus on ourselves. What I'm not going to do today, I want to be very clear, is talk about, you know, the medical information, nonprofit funding and resources, just because that's come up in the past when I've done this presentation. You know, we're not going to talk about policies or practices, and we're not going to determine the experience of others, right? Something so nuanced about trauma is that it's not just an experience or the event itself, but literally trauma lives and takes up space mentally, emotionally, physically, even down to our tissues, right, of our body, keeping the score of trauma. So in this, we're not going to determine the experience of others. We can share our experience, we can listen, we can honor, and that's my intention for today. So in the chat, I would love to know what you would want to take away, kind of hearing what today is about. What are the objectives? What are yours? What are yours? What do you want? So I can honor your time and give you that. Give yourself that moment, drop in the chat, write it down for yourself. Let me know. Do you want to hear from other people? Do you want to ask questions? Is there something you want? Right? So giving people that mental moments to write stuff down, or let me know. And again, I appreciate your time. So again, giving that moment. Nice, nice. Thank you, Ismael. Hilda, we got coping skills. That is a huge focus of today. So I would definitely love to hear from you, Hilda, when I'm presenting on that, your thoughts, or if you want to unmute. Anyone else? Let's keep it coming, right? We're all here today. Y'all made a decision to be here. So what do you need, right? Let's do that. Let's do this for ourselves. We have Luca, self-care strategies for frontline servers. Yes, definitely huge part of today. I think you and Hilda are hitting it off, right? Of how do we cope within this work? Lori, I love this. Thank you. So beautiful. Coping skills for dealing with trauma. Absolutely. Because we need to have our coping skills in general. We need to have coping skills when things are even going great, right? But we also need to have our coping skills when we're in that trauma. So again, thank you so much to the 4 or 5 of you. We have Kendra coming right now, who says to be aware of how I've been impacted. Yes. If we were in a room together, I would totally invite you in front, not to put you on the spot, but this is the point of today. In sharing our experiences and sharing our questions, it's really naming the change, naming the impact, because that's how we address trauma, right? Jennifer, I love this. How do we motivate our students, right? Yes, there's trauma, but there's also resiliency. There's also healing. And, you know, to go off, you know, what Lucas and Hilda were saying, how do we cope? How do we cope is motivational versus let's just be positive through it. And Jennifer, I can't wait to hear from you. I want to continue this conversation, so please loop back in. And Deborah, is the last one I'm going to highlight. I teach at a community college. Many students come through junior and senior year of high school. What a time, everyone, to be in those teenage years during a pandemic. So thank you, Deborah, right? And being educated remotely, so many things lost, right? We're experiencing difficulties in catching students up. I'm sure many people who are job seekers have experienced this too, and we can all have this conversation together. So, I love my exercises, right? These reflection points, but I want you to look at the screen and pick what is one thing you've done for yourself this week, right? It's our little icebreaker. What is something you need to give yourself credit for? This, Jennifer, is a way that we can engage with people, share options of how do we keep people motivated? You encourage people, you pump in that encouragement, you recognize what people did, and you give people that credit, right? And you grow people's ability to recognize that in ourselves, because we don't do that, right? So what have you done, people, for yourself, right? Maybe it's a few things, maybe it's everything. Maybe you haven't even thought about this for yourself. I invite you to think about this now. Chrisney, I love that you bought yourself a treat. So nice. I did the same with the coffee this morning. Lucas, you brought yourself something unnecessary on eBay. Yes, we've all been there, right? Kim, we got the massage, letting myself feel, allowing to rest as a priority. Beautiful. Again, this is a slide deck that I totally recommend you printing out. Maybe after this is an activity if you want to continue. You get your good old piece of paper, you put it where you work, or maybe it becomes your desktop. But each week or every other day, you literally look at a list and say, this is what I've done. We are so easy to be like, this is what I'm not doing. This is what I'm doing wrong. This is what I suck at. And that's okay. We could do that sometimes, but how helpful is it? Right. So I hope this icebreaker reflection continues after today, right? Keep this up, keep it going, and keep yourself motivated, people. We definitely have learned that we need that. So during this, self-care, I'm really dedicating a lot of times to the I, to the me, because we need to ground ourselves before we start talking and supporting trauma or individuals who are experiencing trauma in the day-to-day. Like, I am really trying my best, everyone, to model you all the different ways you can zone into yourself in order to zone out and think about everyone else, all the priorities, all the tasks that you're so excellent at, right? So when it comes to COVID-19, this training up front might be triggering for some of us. We might have language, we might have examples or visuals that bring us back to a moment, because trauma, even if we don't directly experience it, or even if we're fine, it's a shadow, it's kind of smoky, it changes, and we don't get to control it all the time. We have a relationship to it, but a relationship, remember, is you and something else, right? And that relationship can evolve. So in this training, give yourself that grace. If you need to log off, if you need to take a break, if you have a question or you want to say something and you don't want to put in the chat, message me directly. If you want to unmute, don't be shy about it. It's your time, all right? And then the last thing is that you don't have to look at the screen the whole time, right? You can look away, you can lie down, you can relax. You are the most important part of this training. So I need you to drop into yourself and zone into you, okay? And then if you've been in these series in the past, I'm gonna ask you now, what is one small thing you're gonna do for yourself to decompress, to debrief after today? So are you gonna call your grandma? Are you gonna talk to a coworker? Are you gonna go on a walk? Are you gonna buy yourself, that coffee drink? What are you actually gonna do for yourself? And it can be small, but it's not insignificant. So put it in the chat, write it down to yourself. How are you going to debrief after today's training? Giving people that moment. Beautiful, beautiful. I hope you're really reflecting, right? What is one thing you're going to do for yourself? I love this. Cook, take a nap. I love a nap. Trust me, y'all. Relax, bath, debrief, yoga tonight. All right, y'all. I hope you're seeing this because there's a lot of power. And when we share ways that we're caring for ourselves, bubble bath, reading, all this, spending more time outside. Yes. So keep it going. Peek at the chat. Your peers are, leading the way right now and how they're going to connect with themselves so that we can continue in this work. I also want to acknowledge that in this training, each and every one of us are coming from such different places, truly, all of us. And I hope this visual helps, not just with today's training, but in the future, in interactions you have with people who you maybe disagree with or don't share experiences with, that all of our stories and struggles are different, but we all deserve to bloom. And I hope you captured, right, or got the spring analogy of what do you hope to grow? What do you hope to do this spring? And how are you going to do that for others? How are you going to help allow others to be themselves and allowing everyone to bloom? Clients, participants, your team, yourself. Again, I invite you to remember this slide deck and maybe remember this visual, maybe print it out, fold it up, hide it somewhere, and you find it. And it's a kind reminder of all of us have a very unique experience. And thank you, everyone, for your examples. We have a lot of meditation, self-rest, self-talk, taking another walk. And I just want to, open up the floor and really let's stick to the questions, y'all. But, COVID-19 is it's been over 2 years. It's almost approaching 3 at this point, right? Who knows? What have you noticed when it comes to the mental health of, our job seekers, the students that we work with, our participants, between March 2020 and 2 years later, and what you found useful? So really have this be focused on what have you noticed with your clients and participants. I'm going to see if anyone raises their hand. And even if you just reflect, what has this looked like? You can put in the chat, you can unmute, but we got to start. We got to start with this, right? I forgot who said it in the chat, but we got to talk about how we've been impacted. So, we have here, thank you so much, Yolanda. Life and family is more important. Absolutely. I feel like our priorities really came to the light. We had to be honest with ourselves. Christine, I'm going to allow you to talk. Feel free to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me?
Absolutely.
I'm not too loud, but so I work in a program called WIOA with the youth. So I'm a youth coordinator at a community college, and what I've noticed with a lot of our youth since the pandemic started is definitely a rise in anxiety. So going from being in-person classes and then having to go fully remote and be fully online, and then now we're kind of moving back to in-person classes. We just, kind of lifted that mask mandate. Yeah. And I just noticed a lot of my youth just having a hard time going back into the classroom. Yeah. And then also even with just I've had several of them tell me going to the grocery store or different things like that, some of them have anxiety attacks and different things like that. So things that they may have never experienced that before, but now I'm just noticing they're having a hard time adjusting, coming back into, the school setting or even into work settings and things like that.
Yes, no, thank you so much for naming that. There is someone in the chat earlier who, asked how do we describe the impact? And I want to thank you, Christine, for kicking us off with that. I really appreciate your time. I hope to hear from you and see your name in the chat. Thank you. So, now I hope you all are keeping up with this beautiful chat box. There's a lot going on here. And, as Christine brought up, anxiety being a huge thing, right, that we're noticing. And it's not just an individual's willpower or capacity, right? It's really our environment has changed so much rapidly. And we have to take that into a mind, right? We have to remember that trauma is not just what I experience as an individual, but how am I an individual living in my larger world, in my environment? What are the expectations around me? I want to just highlight very briefly, because I've seen in the chat quite a bit, depression, whether you're a job seeker or a student or a professional or, all of the above. But being unproductive was something that a lot of us have struggled with. We're struggling maybe right now. And sometimes we're unproductive because we're depressed. And then we're depressed because we're being unproductive, and it's a vicious cycle that we can be in, and it can be very difficult, right? There is, again, so much beauty in this chat box. I really hope you're peeking in. I'm going to do my best to, synthesize, but whether it's mental health, personal life, not even knowing what you're experiencing, right? It's really highlighting a level of disengagement. It's really highlighting, so many internal barriers to success. And we all know, in addition, in our services, in our world, there are other barriers that people face. So internally, externally, environmentally, all of us are not only navigating a new terrain, some of us don't have the confidence or the safety to say what we need, what's blocking us. Even just describing it to another human being might be impossible because I'm still processing it, right? I'm going to highlight this, soon. But again, check out this beautiful box. There's so much going on. Staff members being nervous, being close proximity with other students, right? How it's impacted our community, right? Our whole community's been impacted, and how do we navigate from here? And Hilda, as you're saying, anger, right? One thing I want to say about anger, and this is my cultural upbringing with it, but also my professional upbringing, is that our anger tries to protect us. I feel like anger can, easily get a bad label, and it does, it can have it. But we have to remember that our body, right, is literally here to protect you, to serve you. It literally exists for you and your well-being, right? Since day one, since you were born. And when we think about anger or fear, which we're going to talk about soon, right, with our trauma responses, we have to remember that the anger of this person, the anger of ourselves, is that protection. It's because of this goal to keep you safe. And it's coming out in this very specific way that maybe needs more support, maybe needs to be heard and listened to, because anger is the part of ourselves that is becoming louder, that is becoming defensive, because you have been maybe disrespected in the past. Your body, your mind, your heart has witnessed you struggle in those moments. And that anger is that call back, right? Of, I'm here to protect you. We're not going to let that happen again. I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you in the past. So again, just giving people that support, that even anger can be a tool when we understand it from a trauma perspective. So again, I'm just going to do a really quick recap of all the conversations we had, because truly all the trainings that you've been on, all the other topics, comes together right now with COVID-19. There is no denial to it. The amount of trauma that all of us have experienced, have witnessed, have seen, no matter where we are, right? No matter where we are. So this is a definition you've seen in the past, but I want to encourage you, after today's training, what have been the specific events? What have been the specific experiences and effects you have noticed with your clients and within your services? Because trauma is not only what happens to a person, but what are the circumstances? What has environmentally changed, right? Of going completely virtual, going isolated, right? People who were technologically locked out, so much time lost. People were actually lost, and so much grief, right? Which we'll highlight soon. But I really want you, I'm asking this with the kindness of my heart, but if we don't name the specifics of what, of when, of these events, of these experiences, of these effects, as an organization, as a team, you as a person working with people, it's going to come up, it's going to be unclear. It might be difficult to really engage in solutions and next steps if I'm not giving myself that processing time, so that when I am meeting a client, when I am meeting a young person, when I'm meeting a community member, or I'm in a challenging moment, I can have literally this page, this visual, this time to say, I've reflected on what all these things are. I'm being a witness on what it's been. So when I meet someone, or I'm in a whole new different situation, I have that knowledge, I have that wisdom, I have that connection in order to be grounded, in order to be present for this new individual, because I've given myself that time. Once I'm telling you, once you do this, everyone, it's going to give you clarity. It's going to free up mental space, because if not, all these traumas, all these experiences, all these moments are just floating around you and can feel like they're chasing you, right? To say, it's been a lot and I'm being overwhelmed. So give your experiences, the events, the effects of what you've seen a home. Write it down. Let it exist outside of you instead of inside of you, right? Let's uplift. Let's connect with it. I've done this in domestic violence work when I worked with individuals who were trafficked. I needed to literally create a little T-chart, right? Events, experience, effects, and just start listing down. You can also do this on a weekly or monthly basis so that you can properly debrief on what the experiences have been. I know I'm giving you a lot of homework right now, but I'm telling you, as someone who's done crisis work, who have worked in life and death situations with clients, you know, like, that changed my life. That changed my life so much. And I really encourage you, especially if you feel safe, right? Because it can also be hard. Do this activity. Create your little T-chart, event, experience, effects, and give these thoughts, give these witnessing moments a home, because they deserve it. And you deserve to be at peace with yourself too in its exposure to trauma. I also want to acknowledge that in this moment, there's a lot of collective trauma, right? These experiences that are reaching across all groups, all levels of society, and there is various levels of suffering due to this exposure. This is a moment in our world that, you know, the last time there was a pandemic on this scale was around over 100 years ago, right? At the turn of the century. So it's very, very important for us to remember that. None of us have been alive for anything like this. And there, again, as people said in the chat, we need to be graceful. And no matter where you are in your experience in this trauma, in COVID, it's about that we. It's about that person you don't know. It's about everything that you're never going to find out about that person's life or about your coworker. So how are you keeping all that in mind and having a trauma-informed perspective? Trauma's already here. Trauma's already present. And we need to keep that in mind in how we speak, engage, reflect with others, and take that self-awareness for ourselves before we interact, right? Again, this is a lot of review stuff, so it's kind of quick. I'm so excited to allow people to unmute soon. But we also have to be honest that COVID-19 has been a mental health crisis. You know, I can drop the statistics, I can say the facts, but y'all already said in the chat box that we have seen another pandemic, right? When it comes to this, for young people, for elders, for ourselves, even for all of us as professionals, right? It's been quite a time, and we're still processing and in a new stage of the pandemic, right? So I'm not going to read through all these examples. I think a lot of this can come up. And again, I want to support you in this moment if this is triggering, to say that you're not alone, right? Your experiences are valid. And we're definitely going to talk about that self-care, that coping. But the reason why I have this slide is that we need to reflect internally with ourselves to be supportive and not just think about this being over. How are you doing in the inside? What have you felt? How's your heart, right? I really, really want to support you in that. We have here in the chat, thank you so much. There has been so much fear and misunderstanding with the pandemic, right? I do not have memories of another pandemic in my lifetime, exactly. And mentally and emotionally, and even, you know, on a larger scale, our sense of meaning has been impacted too. And these are very vulnerable conversations, right? To have and to think and to give to ourselves, but there's so much power behind it, people. I also, you know, now want to invite, if anyone wants to unmute, just please sticking to the question, you know, what are ways, either one, right? What are ways that we have thrived or we have helped participants during this time, right? And, you know, this is another question, if you want to go in this direction, how have you supported job seekers or yourself in making sense of what is happening in the world, right? How did you do that? So again, allowing people to either chat, raise your hand to unmute you, but we need to name these things. We need to be present. So I'm going to allow for anyone to raise their hand, chat, take this time for yourself. but ways that we have thrived, we've helped, or helped make meaning on all this. Beautiful. I'm loving it. I really appreciate your comment, Amy, about, you know, providing the technology, providing the alternatives. We're going to come back to these two questions. I recognize it might be early on in the training, but I think there's some power behind this silence. I think maybe for some of us, it's the first time we're engaging with this type of question. It's also a lot to answer. I did not make it fair or, you know, approachable to drop in, but I want to come back to this. So we'll take a lap on these two. Thank you, Lucas, for sharing, right? I've noticed habitual self-isolation persists, older and depressed individuals, unsupported youth, but, you know, not offers of solutions right away. How to agree with different and strange world that's been. We have here, you know, our organization's providing Zoom calls as an option. And I just want to say thank you to the three of you dropping into the chat. You know, that those two questions were really big, and I appreciate you taking a bite. But I want you to, again, remember and print out this slide if you have the capacity. But when we think about what does it mean to engage in this world, or to engage in programming, or in your services, or you're to be a provider, remember this visual, right? Burning out is something that many of us experience on a professional level, on a personal level, even on an emotional capacity, right? Where we had some strong falls and we had to re-meet ourselves. We had to re-meet ourselves in this pandemic. We had to connect with ourselves. We had to rearrange our entire lives, right? Even if it was fine for you, that was still something you had to did and probably impacted you to some scale, right? We have so many individuals, including ourselves, where it felt like we were barely surviving, right? You make this huge hurdle and then you're faced with another huge wall, and just keeps coming up and coming up and coming up. And even for those who are thriving, right, in the sense of you're in a good place, right? It's not to say things are perfect, but, you know, you are advancing, you feel good about where you're at, even though we have some challenges. Even if you're thriving, people, during this pandemic and you've been okay, it's still exhausting and can get tired climbing all these stairs. And for our participants, right, we have to remember that most people, when they start off our services, are starting on base 1 or, you know, 0.0. And we need to be clear that whether someone's burning out, barely surviving, thriving, all of those things happening at once, because that can happen to us, we got to be very clear and intentional about where we're going, how far we've come. And that's why I had those grounding techniques in the beginning of what's one thing you want to grow? What's one thing you want to acknowledge from this past week? We can share that with our participants, but we can add a whole nother layer to say, hey, I know that this was really hard, but look, you've overcome this, you're here now, and you're literally at this next step of the process, right? You have the skills, you have the experience. I saw you do this the last time you're in this challenge. And that burnout moment, not that I would say that to a client, but that challenging moment, this is something that we can pull from. This is something that we can reflect on, right? We got to tell people what's happening next, what's in the direction, what's on the horizon. Because if people feel like, even if you're thriving, just climbing stairs and climbing stairs and climbing stairs, even if you're thriving and you don't know where you're going with this or what's the next step or what you've done, you're going to feel stuck. You're going to feel stuck. You're going to feel isolated. You're maybe going to be disappointed. Maybe you're going to disengage because you really don't have the sense of direction. And us as service providers, I can tell you, when you give direction, when you acknowledge how much distance has been covered by your participant, right? Even if there's been mistakes, that is what people need. People do not need to hear from someone else in their life what they're doing wrong. You can rephrase that to say, this is what we can do better. This is what we can do different. I saw how much work you put into it, and I think this is going to help us next time, right? Because so many of us are experiencing all this all the time in various ways, and our clients are too, right? So another visual to help us out. I want to also acknowledge vicarious trauma. We had a whole training on this. It is available, through the ICSPS platform. But we as professionals have experienced trauma as well, right? All of us, we can go back to that slide and name various points where we've been there. I have no shame in saying that about myself to you as a director of trauma initiatives, right? No shame, right? We've all been there. And it's very important to think about how your work, yourself, is being impacted. Your sense of identity, your sense of safety, your ability to trust, showing up to work, having the mental capacity, right? You are human at the end of the day, and we have to remember this when it comes to all this trauma. And again, I'm just going to breeze through these following points because I want to do some reflection with y'all. There has been a lot of direct and personal impacts of COVID-19. There's been public and community impacts that's been captured in the chat already. And I think very importantly, I think this unresolved loss and grief that many of us are still in because the wounds are so fresh, y'all. The wounds are very fresh. And for some of us, we are still being wounded. So I'm going to invite, if you want to unmute and to share, what have you noticed? And there's examples on the slide. What have you noticed as direct impacts when it comes to our participants? And again, allowing you to chat. I would love if someone unmutes, no pressure, but let's keep the conversation flowing. Wonderful, thank you. I'm gonna allow you to talk. Feel free to unmute.
Sorry. So the question is like, how has trauma like directly affected us?
I would say yes, us working with clients. So what's going on when we work with the clients?
I think this might have been mentioned before, but definitely like lack of resources. If we're talking about the pandemic, I definitely feel like I have a few clients who live kind of on the outskirts, like in the country kind of, and some of them didn't have internet capability at all. So we were able to like get them laptops to use and everything, but they didn't even have any way to like get internet to them. So that kind of posed some things, and then also the financial thing too. I think a lot of my clients weren't able to work or different things like that. So that definitely affected them being able to be like successful at school.
Beautiful. And I just want to say thank you so much of even highlighting the alternatives that we have that were our solutions still have barriers, right? So thank you for bringing that up, highlighting rural communities and how it's a very different dynamic. I'm going to allow Ishmael to unmute. Thank you so much, Christine, for kicking us off. Ishmael, feel free to unmute.
Hello. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so one of the things we've been doing here at Southside Help Center is that we started to have candid COVID conversations with community members so that they can pretty much express what they've gone through as far as COVID-19, how that it impacted their lives, dealing with grief, stress, depression. And what we notice is that once they talk, they feel a little bit liberated. They mentioned that itself is kind of healing from what we went through two years ago. So that was very nice to see, and yes, to see them expressing that brought a lot of positive energy to them. Like, we're almost ending the pandemic. Just having a young lady give birth in the hospital while COVID and while the hospitals were full of people was an experience for her.
Yeah.
So that's just one of the examples about healing and still healing. And, we have to do this together. And I feel that, we are starting to heal from this pandemic. And, it's just great to have people support each other in all matters, from the health perspective, mental health, everything from stress, management, anything like that, everything that's there as far as that direct impact personally and family, friends. I think those things are very important to talk about.
Ishmael, I love what you're saying. Could you, just to follow up, and it's not to put you on the spot, but what difference has that made, those conversations as a service provider working with people? What has that done for your services?
Well, we definitely are engaging with our community members again. They feel that, you know, it's an avenue for them um, to come and just talk about it virtually and in person. So just having these conversations and engaging with community members again, I think it's important because a lot of us felt isolated
Yeah.
due to COVID. Also, the experience of, you know, when you have COVID, for you to quarantine and be locked up and you know, we had a family that all the family had COVID, so the mom would cook for them and have plates for each children and go back to her room, and everybody had to isolate. So that was a very it was a great story.
Thank you so much, Ismail, and for all the work that you're doing, and so much success to your organization, because this is literally foundation. Y'all are laying down so many powerful bricks to allow services to continue, people to come back, and to really move at their own process. And I just love how you brought in healing into the conversation, and so much respect to your organ and the fact that you all are facilitating these conversations. That is a
Thank
beautiful
you.
service.
Thank you so much.
Of course, I look forward to hearing from you again. And I just want to, continue to this next slide, right? I think Ishmael has led us through this next point of the public and community impact, right? The class dynamics, the normalization of COVID-19, the abandonment piece. I will say for a lot of us, just to give you a trauma perspective, COVID-19 brought us back to a lot of our childhood, right? Some of the earliest traumas that we experience of being isolated, of not being seen, of not having control in our world, right? Really being vulnerable. And again, like, if people want to unmute, I'm going to have a loss and grief section next. I would love to hear from you. But again, I think Ishmael really highlighted these points. I really appreciate what you're doing, because yes, as we see in the chat, there is a sudden unexplained abandonment. If you want to unmute to share more, I would love to hear from you, because that is such a strong comment. But no pressure, do not want to put you on the spot. But if you want to, I'll just give you that moment. But also, look at these other chats, right? What students are dealing with, our budgets being cut, measurements for performances still being upheld. There's a lot going on here. And this impact, everyone, I want to say it's not going to go away even when the pandemic's over. I know that's like maybe harsh to say, but for communities, for people, for our students, there's a lot of trust that we have to build. I understand as a service provider, you didn't directly cause that loss, but it is on our plate, right? I'm gonna try to unmute you really fast, so maybe let's try this out. So I'm allowing you to talk. I'm allowing you to unmute. Let's see if you can unmute. All right, maybe we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Absolutely, welcome.
Okay.
It's so nice to hear your voice.
I know, because the last time you tried to unmute me, there was an issue with my headset. But with the sudden unexplained like abandonment, with how some people suddenly got sick with COVID, and their families, they were notified, or they didn't understand exactly what COVID was. They were like, well, why can't we go in there and see them? Is this really contagious? Well, you can only see them through FaceTime, or we'll put them on the iPad or something like that. So there were a lot of families who were very angry, and it trickles down to kind of, based on like some of our customers, they may have had that trauma with, okay, say my dad wasn't around, then he came back in my life, we're cool, and then all of a sudden COVID comes, my dad gets sick again. So now my father died, now I feel abandoned. And we just were starting to rebuild that relationship. So it's maybe a trigger in opening up, reopening wounds that they thought were closing, when they had reestablished that relationship. And now, okay, my dad's gone. We didn't fully 100% repair everything that happened when I was a kid. and now my dad is gone. So it's like no type of closure.
Yeah.
So
No.
that happened with someone that I know personally. She was like, I just was getting him back in my life. I just was forgiving him for what happened when I was a kid. And now all of a sudden he's gone and we can't continue to repair that relationship. And I don't understand this whole thing. Why, why did this happen? Where did this come from? So there's a lot of people who are kind of feeling that way as well, pertaining to what happened with the pandemic.
Definitely. And I really appreciate you too, bringing in lifetimes, relationships, people, loss. And I think one of the most difficult things, this is from a more personal perspective, it does come from my, professional background. But when it comes to trauma and the experiences we have, there are some things we can't repair, right? Which is you're a beautiful example of that relationship that ended very abruptly, right? And that can't be repaired with that person. So what is the work you do for yourself? What is the support and time you give for yourself? And Yolanda, thank you for bringing up the smaller support systems, right? If we can't heal in that relationship, how can we heal with others? How can we heal with support? And thank you so much for chatting with us. I'm so glad I heard your voice. And I'm just gonna transition. And thank you so much for bringing the public, the community impact, and how people are navigating this. And this might show up, or maybe not show up with clients that you work with, what their experience, how they're triggered, right? I want to invite, a final person. No pressure, right? No pressure. But when it comes to loss and grief, I feel like we can be here for days talking about this one. This is something I experienced constantly over maybe 6 times last year, and I'm here today to say that this is such an important topic to have. So again, just allowing if anyone wants to unmute to discuss for their clients, right? What has been loss and grief? How has this impacted you working with them? And as someone's warming up to raise their hand, I'm just going to read this chat. That there are individuals who had trauma occur just prior to COVID. Yes, absolutely. That is so true. Trauma was definitely present in so many lives before this collective one, right? And as a result, we are carrying and dealing with that double trauma. Yes, compounding trauma, absolutely. So again, there's examples on the slide that you can read for yourself. I just want to invite any audience member to reflect on what has been the loss, what has been the grief that we've seen, right? And as someone's warming up to raise their hand, I think a lot of people struggled with goodbyes. Just to go off the last speaker, right? The person who's lost, the person who's no longer here, not closing, not having that closure, lifetime ceremonies lost, the ways of life that are never going to be the same. And now we're in this moment as a society of blending, right? Some people say hybrid, but we're blending what was, what is, and what can be, and what we're also unaware of. And I think we need to take that blending mindset after today's training. It's not just going back to what was, because that has been lost. It's not the same. We're not even the same people, right? So, and we've re-met ourselves in so many ways, and we had to face ourselves. We had some challenging moments with that loss and grief. So I just want to acknowledge that. I'm not seeing anyone raise their hand, so want to respect this moment, right? That this is such a heavy topic. And I want to, continue on just to highlight what have been some common responses. So when we think about trauma, people, it is so important to remember it, not just as what happens, but what is our response? What is our reaction? How does it live after it's taken place, right? So here are some examples. Y'all have already talked about all of these. I think everyone is slowly on their way to become trauma experts, and I have learned so much from you already. So I want to just highlight a few. You can definitely read this on your own afterwards, but I want to go back to that anger piece. I forgot who mentioned it. I know you said it earlier. Feel free to chat again, but the experiences of anger, right? And what I was saying earlier about your body, your past experiences, maybe you as a child, right? When we experience anger later on in life, it's due to this protection. It's due to this awareness that maybe you're lacking resources, right? Maybe the COVID magnified oppression that you felt, right? Or experience. Poverty is a form of oppression that I think all of us can say have traumatic and lifetime consequences, right? Maybe there's a lack of consideration. I saw in the chat, I think it was Bianca who said discrimination, right? The experience of discrimination that people have faced during this time, seeking employment, navigating employment even, right? We had here another speaker, right, who said, I'm wrestling with conflicting values. A lot of us face so many contradictions during this time. I think the existential stress, right? I think we all hit one point in the pandemic, even now or even last week. What's the point, right? What's next? How can I continue? And we carry that as like a huge individual weight, but so many of us, if we remember the slide from earlier, COVID was and is a mental health crisis as well, and showing and highlighting that so many of us haven't had the emotional resources or supports, right? And the pandemic really exacerbated that, really magnified that. We had feelings of detachment, right? This feeling of surrealness. And in this moment, I want to just transition us of, it's so important for each of us to know what we feel. Just that awareness. It's not to get rid of the feeling, to fix the feeling, to improve the feeling. Just that awareness of where you're at can give you that mental pause, that give you that mental clarity of that relationship, right? Thinking of your trauma, thinking of your world, thinking of your mental health as a relationship versus what's wrong. We want to drop that what's wrong mindset, because nothing's wrong with you. If you've been on this presentation for the past 50 minutes, there has been a lot going on for any of us to experience stress, to experience some hard questions, to experience some times where we've been really disappointed and sad and upset and have no idea how I actually feel. I want to validate you in that, because our world, you, us, have all experienced that professionally and personally, and we're not having these conversations. We're not naming these things. And that's not your fault. That is a responsibility we have as a society, as supportive people, to ourselves, to honor what have we felt? What has that looked like? And to expand our own language and tools to support ourselves as people in this collective moment in humanity of a pandemic the world has not seen, unless you've been around for over 100 years. So in this slide, if you're seeing it, you're seeing a lot of things. And I want you to take away this tool. There's one thing you just walk away with today is this, print this out. We have few words that we use as a society, as a culture, to describe how we're feeling, but we don't go beyond that. So if you're angry, let's go on that. How is that actually taking shape and form in you, in your actions, in your language, and how you're thinking about yourself or about others or the situation? Do you feel let down? Do you feel mad? Do you feel frustrated? Are you critical of the situation because you're noticing some things that aren't in place or against you? That anger, right, is powerful, but let's engage with it. Let's engage with it. If we disengage from ourselves, from our own emotions, it's going to be difficult, to then support clients to identify, process their own barriers, their own challenges, what they need. Because if we don't focus on what's missing, right, where I'm actually at, and we're so solution oriented, we're trying to fix the problem, but we're not recognizing how the problem is making us feel, or what this problem actually is as an emotion, that how is that solution going to actually live? How long is that solution actually going to last if we're not really dropping into the person? We have to focus on the person. You have to focus on your own personhood. So this is a slide I have had at my office, on my desk when I'm working with clients. And sometimes I use and would refer to this visual to say, hey, what happened in that referral call and you not getting that? That was sad. That was sad for me, because it seems like now there's a vulnerable position that we're in, right? We got to figure out what's our next step. We got to figure out where else we're going to call, but we're going to do it, right? And then sometimes if clients were struggling with what they were feeling or saying, or maybe they got really quiet, I would ask them like, here's just a tool, you know, if you want to look at it, if you want to identify how you feel, I want to respect you in this moment, but I also have to know where you're at. So in this moment, I want to ask you, this is an emotion check-in. How are you feeling in this past week? Right? We want to expand. So whether you're happy, sad, disgusted, angry, fearful, bad, surprised, what's something outside in these emotions you might be feeling, your clients might be feeling, right? Have a Christine who feels numb, or a client feels numb. Give yourself this moment, right? And you don't have to put in the chat, but write it down to yourself. What have you noticed clients feel? What have you noticed yourself feel? Lori, overwhelmed. Lori, that was me yesterday. I was feeling so overwhelmed, and not in a good way. We have anxiety, feeling excluded, frustrated. Yes, people, let's keep it coming. Uncertainty, pressured, tired, stressed, sad, overworked. Yes, thank you, Yolanda, thank you. So much, right? So much. Diana, who's saying numb. Absolutely. So this is something, y'all, I feel like when we start our work days, when we end our work days, you can come back to this resource, right? And identify, how did you feel going into your day and how did you feel leaving out your day? Maybe you check in with yourself midway through to say, this is where I'm at. And it's not to judge yourself. It's not to fix yourself, right? And that feeling, but to really see where you're at, because we have a relationship with ourselves that we need to care, that we need to listen to, that we need to pay attention to and be present with, right? In whatever capacity it is. So I hope this is hopeful. I hope this gives each of us more language, right? We have Deborah. I'm loving this, right? I'm feeling proud and joyful that I remain healthy. Yes, absolutely. One thing one of my teachers taught me is that if you feel bad, fearful, angry, disgusted, or sad, can you pair that with something that you've done positively for yourself, right? So if you feel disappointed, yes, you're disappointed, but can you highlight all the effort you put in, how hard you tried, how you really gave it your best shot? We got to balance these emotions out too, and we also have to care for these emotions like they're people, right? Like we have to do that for ourselves. So thank you everyone for engaging in that. As you know, we have to talk about ourselves too and the professional impact of COVID-19. So this is another reflection. I want you to take these conversations to your job with your peers. If someone wants to unmute, you definitely can. Just stick to the questions. What are some ways you see vicarious trauma, that secondary trauma, that total cumulative stress when you work with job seekers? And how have you been navigating this, right? I think this is the biggest thing. If someone can answer the second question, I think that can be great. Of how have you been navigating this? What strategies and tools have you used? Anything else you need to implement? And again, just giving people this moment, no pressure. But we also need to reflect, y'all. It's been 2 years. We need to reflect on what's been the experience, but also give yourself credit in what you've done, what you've tried, and the efforts that you put in. We have Lee, you know, the keeping in faith in humanity. Definitely, that's a powerful way to navigate this. Definitely a strategy, right? That sense of purpose, that sense of meaning. Facing challenges with hope is so powerful. We can't overlook that. Wonderful. I love this organizational practice from Amy, allowing to work at home and flexible hours. Yes, absolutely. Anyone else? You know, I wanna make sure I'm being open and approachable. This is such an important conversation. We'll hold the space a little longer. Deborah, I really appreciate this. I hope people write this down, right? Drawing up much patience as I can in dealing with coworkers and students. Definitely. And one way that you can draw patience, people, is having that self-reflection time to ask yourself, what don't I have patience for? What irks me? You know, what are my challenges? and really have those honest conversations, not to like say what's wrong with you, but to understand what are your needs, to understand what's your capacity, to be real with yourself, to be honest and say, this is what works well, this is what challenges me, and this is what has worked. And then I'm not sure about this other stuff, but I'm going to name it. The more that we name, the more that we're aware, the more that we can do something, right? Especially if we see it through a relationship lens. So I'm going to continue on just because I'm not seeing hands raised, which is a-okay because there's enough information to cover. But when it comes to providing support and working with our clients, ourselves, our coworkers, as Deborah's mentioning, you know, there are some tools that we need to give to ourselves and give to others. So when you're actively listening, right, this is a few slides back. It's been in future past presentations, but how much do you actually have attention for? When you go into a meeting or a class presentation or a phone call, do you actually pause to say, this is what I'm going to get done, this is what I need to do? But do you ask yourself, this is where I'm at, this is where, like, people like to say, my energy, my physical body is at, right? What am I listening to and what am I not? And when you're not actively listening, right, when you're kind of zoning out, what do you need? What do you need? Your body, when you're zoning out or not listening, is communicating with you. You're probably hungry, you're probably stressed, you probably didn't debrief or process what happened 30 minutes ago, and you're still living in that moment, yet you're in a different place. Nothing's wrong with you. You just need some support and understanding what your needs are so that you can transition, right? Holding space. We've done that a lot in this training. Ishmael walked through a beautiful example of how they've had vulnerable and empowering conversations with people and how that's really built up trust, validation in people receiving their services in order to continue, right? So Ishmael, big credit, want to give you a shout out. And being a proactive advocate. This is something that I want to say from the pandemic. We have saw what didn't work. We saw what the challenges were, right? As Chrisney mentioned in the beginning, of the anxiety that people have coming into the space. How can we proactively support people by understanding what their concerns are, validating that those are real concerns and barriers? I'll highlight some examples soon. But doing this proactively, having these type of engagements can minimize trauma, can validate your service as a service provider, and it also all supports resisting re-traumatization. And you know, a lot of us aren't therapists, a lot of us don't have a master's in social work or another clinical license, but all of us can resist and re-traumatizing someone by just recognizing what are some triggers, what are some barriers, what are some challenges that people face, what are things that people appreciate in me working with them, right? We have some clients who maybe appreciate the phone call, who appreciate at the end of the meeting, you remind them what was actually covered. And really tailoring that for each person is really helpful. You might say right now, Jocelyn, how does that actually deal with trauma? You're just working with people and their preferences. When you support someone in who they are, their identity, their needs, you are preventing trauma, you are honoring the trauma that they've had, you're affirming their identity, and you're showing them that you care about them in this relationship through actions and by all of these other things of actively listening, holding space, being proactive. All of these things combined actively resist re-traumatization of people. So here are some examples. I'm not going to go super into it just because we're running out of time, but check out the chat. You know, we have here kindness goes a long way, compassion goes a long way. We have here taking care of my own mental health, right? It's so easy to take on other people's stress, but we need to have those boundaries. We need to have those limitations. I want to highlight that ways that we can support and validate individuals is very important. I love positivity. I'm all about it. However, sometimes if I'm having a really hard day, or I'm as a client or as a person or as a professional, when you're truly doing everything you can and you're not hitting the mark, the last thing you need is someone telling you that you are missing the mark when you know it's already happening, right? It's like, come on, I need to be supported and uplifted so that I can actually try again. And I'm telling y'all, I love positivity, but we got to use it as a tool. It's not a solution, it is a tool. And I love this, Bianca, right? Toxic positivity is real. And you can trigger people. If I'm experiencing depression, if I've done everything that I've had, if I'm hungry, if I lost people, if I have no one to talk to about what I've been through, and you're just gonna be positive with me right now and say, you'll get over it, you know, just be positive, think happy thoughts, right? Like never quit, never give up. There's a time and place, people, and you can still be positive, but as a tool. Let's not shut down conversations. Let's not collapse people. Let's validate people instead and do it in a more constructive way. So this second one right here, I think all of you can write down, take it home, you know, use it somewhere, put on your post-it note at work. But instead of telling clients just be positive, it's going to be fine, saying, highlighting, I know it's difficult. I know how easily things go wrong because I have worked with so many people who have been in your position. And let's think about what could go right. In you listing out what they've done right, I have seen tears come out of clients' eyes when I've said something like that. And I've had some clients tell me, you're one of the few people in a month. I had one person tell me in a few years, actually tell them what they're doing right in their life and validating them of how hard it's been. All of us, I feel like to some extent, would be brought into tears if we had that. And we're in that huge moment of crisis, of trauma, of hardship, right? Rhonda, I appreciate your comment too, right? Having gratitude's useful, but how is it moving the conversation forward? How is it affirming the individual? How is it moving through the service of what they've done, right? Right, so important. There's another example here. If there's a client who wants to give up, we all worked with clients who maybe they're becoming disengaged. You can tweak the language, obviously, but if you have a client who says, I want to give up, right? And you can tell someone like, if you want to give up, if this is becoming too much, I understand how hard this can be. I understand how much effort and time you've put in, right? I just want you and I to focus on what you've accomplished. I have done that so literally hundreds of times with domestic violence survivors, you know, in really difficult, literally life and death situations, right? Where they wanted to, you know, for whatever reason, give up on the case, not continue the services, whatever it was. And when I said to myself, this might be the last conversation I might have with this person. This person is literally facing this crisis by themselves, right? I'm in this relationship with them here. I'm just like, let's just focus on what you've accomplished. Let's focus on everything you've done. Let's focus on how far you've come. Can we just do that, right? And it's not to keep them in the service, but just to really remind them all that they've put in. There's a second one here I want to highlight. Again, please, you know, come back to these slides. I feel like you can come back, right? You can look at this more. I want to highlight in our last 15 minutes what we've been talking about of self-awareness and self-care. So when we have to remember about trauma is that all of us respond to trauma. Even if we're fine, even if COVID has not been a huge impact in our lives, right? Or wherever we fall in the conversation, all of us as human beings respond to trauma in mostly 4 ways. Whether we freeze in situations, whether we fly away, you know, we, as people say, escape, remove ourselves, avoid, minimize, right? We do that. Maybe we push away. Maybe we worry. We enter worry rabbit holes. That's something that all of us do. Fawn is another trauma response that we have. And it's when we professionally or personally, we focus on other people and keeping the peace. And it's a trauma response because if I'm able to control or manage other people's expectations, people being calm, then I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be fine. People call that people pleasing. And that's a trauma response, right? If I keep the peace, there'll be peace and I'll be at peace, right? I feel like if you're a parent, we have been there with our children. I'm like, all right, I'll buy you this toy. All right, we'll get ice cream. Just give me a mental moment, right? Those are trauma responses that we have, as well as fight. I feel like a lot of us know what it is, what it's been like. Maybe our voice increases. Our clients experience this. We have experienced this, and it's so important for us, you and I, to reflect what has been our trauma response as a person, and what do we notice our trauma response when there's a crisis, when there's a challenge, when there's stress on the job as well. People, another tip from me, from professional experience, when you identify your trauma response, again, whenever you feel safe or in a supportive environment or with a peer or a family member, it really opens up this space to say, wow, this is where I automatically jump to. For me, I would say that my trauma response professionally was the people pleasing, right? If I take care of everyone else, if I'm everyone's advocate, everything's going to be fine. But we know our systems and services don't work that way. There are so many things that we can't control. There's so many things we can't do. And we also can't overwork ourselves. We're not going to get far, right? So I had to learn, I had to engage, I had to have self-awareness and self-care to say, all right, Jocelyn, how do I make my trauma response my strength? How do I turn this around and make this a tool of advocacy, a tool of planning, of how I really care about relationships, how I see the relationships of people, and how I can be that advocate instead of how do I just put out this fire? How do I just take on this work? You know, I'm telling each and every one of you with kindness that when we engage with this, whenever you feel ready, or with whoever, it really can open up a lot of doors, because how you respond to trauma is a tool, is a position that you're in, and you can really work from there. So here are just some examples. It's a zoom in of what they are, of when we freeze, when we fly away. Professionally, if you're a flight person, you might notice that you change projects, right? Maybe you're a procrastinator. Maybe you don't finish up that project that you had and you take on the new project, right? You're constantly moving and moving on, and things are not done. And that's nothing wrong with you. It's just what you need to work on or where you want to start, right? And it's okay. Like this is a huge conversation that we're having. I described the fawn, right? And how I really needed to make that into a tool of mine, right? Of, yes, I'm here to support others and do things for others, but I gotta let others do their own thing. I gotta focus on myself. I always can't keep the peace, right? And I gotta like retain myself. There's also fight, which is something that we've talked about, right? And fight, I would say, if you have a fight response, it's something that you can work with, just like the other trauma responses. You can become assertive. You can channel it, right? Maybe it's you making boundaries so that you don't go into that fight mode, right? Or you can use that to have courage to advocate for your clients, to advocate against barriers. Maybe your fight is a determination you have for your services, for the people you work with, but we have to channel it. We have to see what behaviors come up. We have to see our defaults in order to move in that way, right? Into that leadership mode. So I just want to have a quick poll. I know we're coming up on time, but when you're at work or experiencing crisis or stress, what do you notice yourself fall into, right? Is it the fight, the fawn, the freeze, the fight? And no pressure, but just type A, B, or C, D of what's coming up, right? What tends to happen at work? I would say for me, yesterday, I forgot who said it. I had an overwhelmed moment where I just froze and I was like, I don't know if I can do this right now. And I just needed to process, like, okay, Jocelyn, I'm freezing. I'm feeling overwhelmed. Remember the emotion wheel. Okay, this overwhelmed is about this. What can I do as a small step? So thank you everyone for Bianca. I love that option, all of the above, because that is true. We can experience all these things, right? We can experience all these things. I also want to say that when we're experiencing stress or trauma, we can start off in a fight or a fawn, and we can go into a freeze or a fight. You know, our responses to trauma or stress can change over time, and we have to remember that. So this is something that I want to leave you with. I hope you print out this slide. But when it comes to your trauma response or stress or small promises, what are small things that you can do for yourself, right? Whether it's for your future, for your past self, for your present self. Don't think of this as a to-do list. I want you to focus on what you've actually done for yourself. Reflect on our icebreaker, right? When it's like, pick one of these things you've done. I want you to focus on the past 2 years, month, whatever you choose. What have you done for yourself? I want you to give yourself credit. Self-care is often, what can you buy? What do you need to do? How you're not working out? And I'm not here for that. Absolutely, I'm over that conversation. When we talk about self-care, when we talk about our trauma response, when we talk about stress and challenges, we need to move into what have we accomplished? What have we put in? What have we tried? Ishmael, thank you. Reflecting on your accomplishments and how you're going to continue to grow that as an individual. Ishmael, beautiful. I love that. And that's the definition of self-care I want each of you to walk away with today. Don't think about the to-do list of everything that's wrong, everything you got to fix. It's not self-punishment. It's not self-judgment. It's about how you have been caring for yourself and the fact that you truly are the best person, the experts when it comes to yourself, your self-awareness, what you need, how you fall into that moment of stress, how you fall into that moment of trauma response, and seeing yourself with that compassion, empathy, respect that we are all surviving right now, people. So I hope this is something different for you to remember to have when it comes to self-care. And, you know, be kind with yourself. If you are facing challenges with self-care, don't blame yourself. Don't be harsh on yourself. Maybe it's just not the right time. Maybe it's not the right focus. And I want you, again, go back to this visual and remember, what is something that I've done? So maybe your challenge is time, but maybe you're doing a lot of other stuff for yourself, right? Maybe you got that Starbucks that someone mentioned. Maybe you're here today. Maybe you've done other stuff for yourself, right? If you're feeling a challenge, you need to balance that challenge and that accomplishment of what you've done recently, what you've actually given to yourself. I'm seeing a lot of time pop up as a challenge, and I hear you on that. I want to encourage you to reflect, what have you accomplished? What have you actually done? Even if you're limited on time, see other things that you've done too. And if time is, really crushing you, the fact that you recognize that it's something outside of your control, that is self-care too, people. So I just want to leave us off with some resources for coping, because this is something we've been discussing the entire time. What we've experienced, what we've noticed, what we've done, how do we communicate? This is such a beautiful way to wrap up the training. I'm just going to highlight these definitions for everyone, but when it comes to coping, we really need to have daily tools for ourselves. So what are practices or little things you do for yourself when you're stressed? And you need to think about this before you're stressed, right? Like, take a time today, this week, whenever, of what do you do? What do you do well? What do you want to grow for yourself, right? What helps you relieve stress? And don't be judgmental with yourself. If it's watching Netflix, if it's, eating some ice cream, don't judge yourself. That's your tool. That's what you do. And we have to name these things. We have to be kind. And remember, we have a relationship to trauma, but also our coping, our healing, and what we choose to do for ourselves. And it's okay, totally okay, if your coping is also some quick fixes, right? You are supporting yourself in a very stressful moment. And I'm literally telling you, the more you write these things on a page, the more you talk about it without judgment, the more you have to work with, right? This is a slide I find so powerful for everyone to come back to, but it's type of coping skills. So I say, like, if this is a brand new conversation to you, or you've had this conversation with yourself in the past, come back to this slide and reflect. What do I tend to do, right? What are my go-tos? What are my quick fixes? But what are other things that I can explore, right? It's okay if you distract yourself. That is a natural coping style all of us have, right? I'm going to take my mind off the problem and maybe I'm going to engage in another hobby because I know that this is too much for me right now and that I need to take a lap, right? Maybe I take the opposite action of what I want to do, like just do something versus I'm going to go on a walk. I'm going to sleep on it. I'm going to journal. I'm not going to engage in this right now because I don't feel like I'm in the place to do it. You can do these things professionally as well when you're at work and really, really list out, again, get your notebook and what you tend to do. What have you accomplished, right? What's been successful? What do you want to grow? Are things that I have done for my teams, I have done with people who I supervise, I've done with volunteers. When we are honest about ourselves, about what is our stress, what is our emotions, and we have language for it, we can actually have conversations, as Ishmael's saying, and it can become healing. It can become validating. It can take us on a whole nother level from that experience to say that experience is now something that I can pull from, something that can guide me and can even help me assist others or see others because I've been there. I have experienced that. I know how hard it is, and I'm going to help this person be themselves and reach that experience on their own as a supporter. But we got to do this work for ourselves with kindness, with respect, with no judgments. So these are the last questions I'm going to leave people on. We are at time. We got 2 minutes left. But I really want you, before the end of the week, the month, whenever you look back on these slides, which domain of self-care stands out more to you? And remember, it's listing what have you done already, not what you want to do. What have you done already? Give yourself credit, people. It's life-saving. What strategies do you want to use for coping, right? We can go back to the previous slide. And then how do you want to connect these tools, these options, these language for the clients you work with, the job seekers? So this is time. I am so sad to let you go. It's been such an honor. Truly, truly so much respect and love for each and every one of you. I hope that this was helpful. I can't wait for our next training. Email me if you have any questions. And again, I really wish each and every one of you have a beautiful day.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn, and thank you to everyone who attended today. Couple of closing items before we close out. I did put in the chat the URL to our Illinois Workforce Academy website where you can access all of our Workforce Wednesday webinars from 2020 all the way back to 2017, 2021, 2022, all of our webinars. So we have an archive there, and you can access all of the trainings that were in this trauma series on the 2022 webinar button that's on that URL there. I also put in the link to today's survey. Once we log out, Zoom will prompt you to take that exact same survey. You can click on the link there that I put in the chat. It'll also be in the follow-up email. So all the information I put in will be in the follow-up email as well. I've also put in my email too. So if you would like to get in touch with Jocelyn or anyone from her team, or you have any questions about today's session or any workforce webinars, you can feel free to reach out to me as well directly. Also, we do, quick plug, have our last webinar, I believe it is, Jocelyn, next week on April 6th. We have Building Trauma-Informed Remote Work Culture. So we hope you join us for that. And we hope you have already registered for it. But if you have not registered for it, here is the link to go ahead and register for the one next week. So I just put that in the chat as well. So I think that's it. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time, and have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you so much, everyone. You are such a powerful group of people. And, you know, this training literally came to life in a whole different way because of your presence, because of your engagement. And I'm seeing a lot of thank yous in the chat, but that's that's a reflection of y'all and what you really brought today, the conversations you had. And I hope that this continues after today, because there's a lot of power, healing, and hope when we do this together. So thank you, Kirsten. Thank you, everyone. And I am so excited for next week. Hope to see you there. And please, seriously, email me if anything comes up. I am here and I want to be your advocate. So thank you, everyone.